I'm Kat, an independent midwife from Wales. Welcome to the Mother of All podcasts, where nothing is off the table of discussion. If it leaks, cries, swears, screams, goes up, but doesn't stay up, we're talking about it. It's time to get raw and real. Your no BS guide to pregnancy, preconception, birth, adolescence, wet dreams, wet in the bed, coming home pissed. Who knows? Whatever. We're just going to talk about it. Life in parenting doesn't come with a manual. Well, not a decent one anyway. So let's just create a podcast. Welcome to the Mother of All podcasts. I don't even know where that come from.
That's good. That's good.
That's not even in it.
That's good.
Today I have on my show Greg, one of my bestest buddies. We are going to be talking about preconception, fertility in male and female. Do you want to just introduce yourself and say what you do?
I'm Greg. I am
Irish.
I am very, very Irish, and I'm a qualified nutritionist, and I generally deal in both males and females, but recently I've taken a really keen interest in terms of female hormones.
Weirdly, my first question is, why have you taken an interest in fertility in general?
Males are very predictable in terms of how...
In every way.
Yeah, males are very predictable. Like, we always hear the phrase where they put it from, like, you know, men are the same from 18 to 80, whereas females change on a monthly basis.
Yes.
So female physiology is much more interesting and dynamic than male physiology tends to be. There is some issues around male fertility and issues around male hormonal cycles throughout lifespan, but it's not nearly as dynamic or as interesting. As female physiology is.
Yeah, because you like to learn.
Much harder,
yeah.
Female physiology, but it's much more interesting.
Much harder to learn, or much harder to like correct and help and put things right, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I don't necessarily think it's harder to influence female physiology. There's just so much more at play. So like we'll touch on in a bit, if you're trying to affect female fertility, like with males, you're looking at really specific. You're looking at their ability to produce sperm and effective sperm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Predominantly, there's other factors involved, but mostly that's what it is. Whereas when you look at female fertility, you're dealing with hormonal, physiological, lifestyle factors, but you're also looking at, is there any anatomical problems in terms of females with fertility? There is some anatomical issues with males as well, but they're not nearly as common or as profound that you tend to get in females.
Well, as you know, I'm a midwife, and even when we did our 3 years of training, and I've been a midwife for 18 years, it's only recently, I don't know, maybe it's been out there for years, but it's only, to me, it's highlighted more recently that a man plays such a massive part in that placenta, which keeps the baby alive. So going back to his sperm, obviously if he goes to a normal fertility clinic and they're like, yeah, you've got good swimmers, mate, you know, you fucking got this. Mm-hmm. But the quality of that sperm can have a massive impact on the quality of the placenta. What did you know that? Because I'm a midwife and I feel like I should know that. And we were talking about this. That's why we've become together.
When you look at a sperm test in a male is a really appropriate way to assess sperm, but it gives us an idea of the amount, the motility, and how many of them are alive, generally speaking. And like there's percentages that you need there, and it is a really important factor when you look at male fertility. But what it doesn't give much influence of is actually the quality of that sperm. So when we look at the morphology of sperm, it can be affected. The testicles, so like when we look at the Sertoli cells, which are what are responsible for producing sperm, they're really, really susceptible to outside influence. So when you look at, we don't all know, that's a weird thing to say, but like we've got a blood-brain barrier, we've got a gut barrier, we've got all these different barriers throughout our system, but we also have a blood-testicular barrier, and that is extremely sensitive to like things, and these are very broad terms, but to like oxidative stress or inflammation, they're very, very susceptible to them. And sperm can be influenced really, really quickly because the turnover of sperm is a month to 3 months. Yeah. So the turnover is massive. So when we maybe go on a session, we go on the piss for a weekend, or we eat bad food consecutively for days, that will affect our sperm really, really
till
quickly.
the next cycle.
Yeah.
And they can correct it before the next cycle. Whereas fucking hell, they just have it so much easier than women trying to get pregnant.
Well, the difference.
And I'm very pro man. I don't say that because women.
I think it's easier for men to correct their issues.
Yeah.
They're just often neglected. So whether that's, I don't necessarily think it's a science thing. I think we know in the science that 30 to 40% of infertilities are either a combination or a male problem.
Yeah.
But whether it's a societal thing, so men are not as keen to get tested, and without sounding vulgar, like men think I can bust a nut, therefore I can.
My job's done.
My job now is done. Whether they don't take into account the effects of even stuff like nicotine or alcohol or processed food or stress and what effect that actually has directly on the Sertoli cells that produce sperm.
Well, why would you? Because you've never had to.
Never.
It's once you've planted that seed, literally, the woman then takes over. And if that doesn't work, it's not a two-way thing. It is, but it's not like talked about.
Yeah, and I also think like we know quite well that over 30 to 40 years the quality of sperm has dramatically dropped in males, and our levels of testosterone, which also have an influence in our production of sperm, have dramatically dropped over the last 30 to 40 years. Whether it's lifestyle, you can get into some of the more nuanced stuff when people start to talk about whether it's actual environmental factors, like is it pollution, is it exposure to phthalates and plastics and all these things, and there's probably a factor there. But I think for the vast majority of men, it's poor eating habits, which have continued to go worse, increases in obesity, and lack of activity for the most part, for most males.
And then females, obviously.
Yeah. Like the same factors generally play in females.
So we've talked about the man's role, and obviously we can talk more about that. But what's the woman's role in preconception? Because they got two roles, and obviously they're a team. But I think there's always been this misconception that miscarriage belongs to the woman. So in terms of fertility, would you say that is also majority of the time? Like scientifically, is it the woman's fault?
No, I just think there's way more factors that play into miscarriage on the female side than do on the male side.
Yeah.
So like when you look at a woman's ability to conceive, it comes from her grandmother.
Yeah.
So like there's they'll generally just call it like transgenerational trauma.
Yes.
So like if your grandmother had poor quality of eggs, you're inclined to have
you're
poor
born
quality.
with them, right?
Yeah. So in those factors, I think that women have, I don't think the word responsibility is the right word I'm looking for, but I think females have much more to consider when they think about
having a baby
than a man does. Like, and I'm simplifying it on the male side here, but like if a man goes ahead and drops, if he's overweight, drops 10% of his body fat and eats a really high antioxidant diet,
he's good to go.
He's probably going to be fine unless there is like primary damage to the testicles or secondary, some sort of brain problem possibly. Like you can get into the argument of like erectile dysfunction or retrograde ejaculation in males can also be problems, but generally speaking, males can fix their problem really, really quickly. Whereas I think with females, particularly when you look at some of the anatomical problems that can occur, like when you look into fertility in male versus female, it's like a snapshot for males. It's like, right, really high antioxidant diet, don't drink, don't smoke, all those things, you'll be good in 3 months.
Do you know erectile dysfunction? Because I've got a guy coming on to talk about his actually. Does that affect the quality of the sperm? Because I didn't know that.
Well, it's going to be, erectile dysfunction can be for a few, like generally speaking, let's say 2 different reasons, like whether it's a low testosterone problem, which obviously will affect sperm quality. The other problem is going to be a nitric oxide problem. So it's the ability to be able to get blood flow to that area. That's obviously going to have effect with nutrient delivery to the testicles if there's low blood flow. So yeah, it has a direct effect.
Wow.
What most men tend to neglect, though, with erectile dysfunction is they automatically assume it's a testosterone problem.
Well, I did.
Normally
I genuinely thought you just
problem.
can't fucking get it up, mate, or you can get it up and you can't keep it up. I genuinely thought
there's
that's all it
psychological
was.
problems. Like that's a huge issue with males. There's a psychological problem around getting or maintaining erection. But for most men, it is a nitric oxide problem, so it's a circulation problem. More so.
that be, we're going off tangent and I knew we would, but can that be fixed, if you like, with food?
Yeah.
Fab.
Yeah. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, Viagra works, but Viagra's mechanism is that it keeps nitric oxide around for longer. So, like, directly, that's what it does. And that's the same with stuff like tadalafil is, I think, I don't know, is that the brand name or is it the actual drug name? But like newer variations of stuff like Cialis is real common now. I think that's just the off-brand name of Viagra. But they all do the same thing. They either block the breakdown of nitric oxide or they speed up the enzyme that actually produces it. So that's all they do. They don't play on testosterone.
Wow.
They can increase testosterone though because they all tend to have testosterone and nitric oxide have this weird overlap.
Okay.
So it can be a combination of both. That's why you'll find people that take testosterone, all of a sudden they're like, I can't actually get it down anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely good to go. If I knew like it wouldn't be that much conversation about men because they're easily fixed, but say I'm sat here and I'm a man and I'm like, you know, my missus wants to have a baby. What's the one piece free advice that they wouldn't need to invest in or anything that you would say to them to just go away and do and give yourself if they don't have the finances or they just can't be fucked?
If we're not going to look supplementally with them, then I would just dramatically increase the amount of fruit and vegetables that I eat in a male.
So easy.
Yeah. But similar, in fairness, like that same mechanism affects loads of the problems with females as well. But like for guys, they need a lot of antioxidant capacity.
Which is packed in fruit and veg.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I think first step with most men is like, obviously the removal of illicit drugs, nicotine.
Boring lifestyle.
Yeah, boring lifestyle, basically. No alcohol. Because it's interesting, like alcohol dramatically affects the sperm, doesn't have as much of an effect on preconception in females. It obviously has a huge effect when they're pregnant.
Yes, of course.
But doesn't seem to have, or the research isn't there yet to show it has that much of an effect. That's casual drinking, not excessive.
Yeah, of course.
Doesn't seem to have as much of an effect on females.
I didn't know that either.
There you go.
So let's flip over to the women because there's just so much to talk about there. What's some of the more, well, let's just blanketly, like the ones that are obvious, if women are having problems with fertility, what's the obvious reasons? And then we'll talk about the real obscure.
Yeah, so like with females, they have to first know if they're ovulating.
Yeah.
Like, and I think sometimes it's often neglected. You assume because you bleed, therefore you ovulate.
Yes.
That's not true. So there has to be that progesterone surge at some stage to assume that you actually ovulated. So always checking kind of mid-cycle whether temperature increased. It's somewhere between 0.2 and 0.3 degrees. It's not dramatic, but it's really noticeable.
And it's good. It's such a good indicator.
It's a really clear indicator of ovulation in girls. So like actually checking cycles to ensure that you're having multiple months of ovulation, not one with a skip, because then you're actually running into other issues hormonally. So you have to make sure that, I guess the problem with females sometimes is they'll go like, I need to fix this in 3 months because I need to be pregnant now. And you're like, this could be a 6 to 12 month thing.
Especially if you've been on contraceptive pill. You wouldn't believe the amount of women that don't understand their cycles. I've actually hired, I'm going off tangent, a cycling coach to speak to Kelly Lowry and Amy. She's doing a one-to-one session to actually teach them about like the luteal phase and all of that, because you're not taught it in school, and then you're meant to leave, have kids if you want them, without actually knowing. You might not even be ovulating, so therefore you could save yourself so much heartache and just find out earlier rather than leaving it too later.
Yeah.
What's some of the most obscure things then that we talk about?
Well, touch on like, I think when you look at like some of the not so obscure things, but is often not tested, is thyroid antibodies.
Huge.
Yeah, it's a massive factor. That immune dysregulation that comes along with something like, so just for reference, most people will know what the thyroid is, and people hear about underactive thyroid and its effects on.
Just explain.
Yeah, so like thyroid hormone does loads of
so much
stuff.
more.
Like as in, you'll normally get so think about it in this way: thyroid production is responsible for our for our production of stomach acid, for our stomach to contract. So you do generally find women with low thyroid that they tend to be constipated, but it's also responsible for our metabolic rate, so our ability to be able to produce energy effectively. So that's what most people associate thyroid hormone with, because they'll find that when they become underactive thyroid, they start to accumulate body fat.
Yes.
But
more tired.
More fatigued, tends to have associations with anemia, tends to have associations with high cholesterol in females and males actually as well. But when women in particular end up with low thyroid function, it's very common. Now, the percentages are hard to figure out, right? Like people will hear regularly, and I've never actually seen the research, and I tried to find it, that 80% of underactive thyroid in females is actually Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune thyroiditis.
Wow.
I don't think it's that high.
No.
I really don't think it's that high. Having just looked at so many underactive thyroids in females, for me, I probably see it 30, 40, maximum 50% of the time, but it's still really dramatic, right?
Yeah.
So that's when there's an autoimmune reaction. So your body's attacking your own thyroid. So you'll end up with increased TPO antibodies. But these antibodies create a really heightened immune response, and it's really common then that women will miscarry when they have these elevated antibodies.
Does Hashimoto's obviously go undiagnosed?
Yeah, it takes 8 to 10 years to diagnose Hashimoto's, but most autoimmune diseases it's the same.
Fuck.
So the reason why I don't bash Western medicine very often, because I think it does so many really cool stuff.
Well, it does. It's good. It's 50-50, isn't it?
Yeah,
we can't be without it, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I cut off my arm, you don't really want to see a nutritionist.
No.
But when you look at the problems that tend to come along with autoimmunity, so if you flagged for underactive thyroid, they'll just give you replacement.
Yeah.
And that's the problem solved.
Well, I've been that person.
Right? But realistically, you could have underlying autoimmunity, which can have dramatic effects with going away from fertility, because you're 50% of the time, if you have one autoimmune disease, you're going to get another. So that could be something a hell of a lot worse, right? So it could be lupus, it could be MS, it could be any of the real nasty autoimmunities that you hear about. So knowing that you have Hashimoto's, people are like, why should I know? It's like, well, for fertility, you should know anyway. But for all these other autoimmune diseases that are a possibility, you have to know. So really common in females to see Hashimoto's with reoccurring miscarriage.
Wow. So reoccurring miscarriage in this country, you have to have 3 before you can be on the reoccurring miscarriage program. Working with a few couples like we are at the moment, none of them actually had any kind of decent blood work to rule out both of what you were saying, really. Why? Like, why would they, if it's so obvious that it could be 50% of the problem? I'm throwing
out the percentages now, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. But whether you go thyroid, PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, make up for 70% of total miscarriage.
It's 70 to 80%, yeah.
So with that in combination, why would they not have a blood test done? Because now, obviously, for PCOS will give you a real clear indication. Thyroid will give you a really clear indication. And then scans generally, I'm sure, with endometriosis, but definitely with fibroids, you need scans. But that should be standard of care. If you're trying to figure out why someone continues to miscarriage. Because endometriosis, PCOS often go undiagnosed as well. And you can also have, and I hate using the phrase because it's not science, PCOSE-like symptoms.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily have to be diagnosed PCOS to have high androgens, like high testosterone, or PCOS looking like PCOS in terms of a scan as well, without it being pure PCOS.
Well, you know, my daughter-in-law has gone through the whole getting investigated and has finally been diagnosed with PCOS, but that was a fucking nightmare. Like, we had to go private because the GP, the NHS, took her bloods and said that her levels were within normal range, when actually when we went private, and her testosterone level is slightly higher, but she has the look of a PCOS person.
PCOSE-like symptoms.
Has the look. And it's been so frustrating for her as a person. Her periods have been all over the place. And that was hell. But for someone who didn't have, not me, I don't mean me like I'm a queen, but I'm like you, I really genuinely feel, and I was messaging you that this is what you've got. That could be years, 10 years of upset of not getting pregnant and just living a really miserable life. And just because the baseline levels on that bog standard GP blood test, she didn't reach, even though she was very symptomatic.
Yeah, and that's like, that's why they say PCOS-like symptoms play a big role here, because like some of the other stuff that we always see, or that you tend to see in infertility, is like blood sugar dysregulation.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
But like that's 70% of PCOS is insulin resistance PCOS. There's other types of PCOS, like you'll get adrenal, inflammatory, immune, and there's one more. But predominantly, most people who have PCOS symptoms or diagnosed PCOS, it's insulin resistance. So it's a blood sugar problem that they have. And you have to unravel that.
Yeah.
Because it's not even necessarily your ability to conceive, carry to term, and have a baby.
It's life.
It's the health of the baby.
Yeah,
so like,
epigenetic, they're already predisposed to stuff.
Dramatically predisposed to being obese when they grow up. So if you want to go back to like even like the Dutch hunger study that was done during World War II, when the Nazis blockaded Holland, and they obviously, so many of them starved, but the ones who managed to conceive and have babies in that time, epigenetically, so many of the women, I can't remember the percentage, so many of the women ended up with PCOS.
No way.
But that's
blood sugar regulation.
Transgenerational, that person trying to maintain as much body fat as they can because the fear of famine.
Wow.
So like it does, like this is why like people will often concern themselves with, I just need to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, you need to be healthy. Both of you need to be healthy, because the sperm will affect the quality of the baby. Your environment will affect the quality of the baby. There's so much more to it.
Oh yeah, that's a podcast in itself.
Yeah.
And one of the questions later covers that. What about fibroids? How do fibroids play such a impact in fertility?
Fibroids isn't as high in terms of percentages with infertility, but fibroids is difficult because they're really hard to treat naturally. There is some stuff out there that shows like really high dose vitamin D, green tea extract can actually help to lower the prominence or the size of fibroids quite effectively. But with fibroids, they tend to cause anemia as well, so that can be a major issue for women who are trying to conceive. Anemia does play a role.
It was huge in so much, doesn't it?
Yeah,
being anemic. What about, we've touched on polycystic ovary syndrome. Would you say that's one of the biggest? Yeah,
PCOS is probably like between 6 and 20% of females have PCOS. It's probably not that high, but that's like, you'll have like stress-induced amenorrhea, which is like stress-induced loss of period, which is often diagnosed as PCOS. So there's some overlap there. But I would say PCOS probably plays the biggest role outside of stuff like standard, like just being obese or having an underactive thyroid. And PCOS plays into stuff like, I'm starting to go down the rabbit hole as well, but like PCOS leads into stuff like fatty liver. So when we have fatty liver, our ability to be able to break down estrogen effectively drops. So we end up with this really weird dynamic of, like, there's so many different, like, there's not so many, but there's different types of estrogen metabolites. Like, so you've got 2-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, 16-hydroxy estrogen, but like the 4-hydroxy, for example, is the one that's strongly associated with breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and female dominant cancers. So our ability to be able to break these metabolites down is determined by our liver health.
So if you've got fatty liver because of PCOS, shit, we're just such an unhealthy culture.
Yeah, I think that's the major issue. Like, I mean, what is it by 2045? If it keeps going at the same rate, no one will be fertile. That won't happen.
No, because it's more, people are talking about it more, but even like, I suppose I'm an open book. I knew fuck all about fertility, and I've had 7 miscarriages myself. Knowing what I know now, I could easily sit here and say, well, obviously it was Nathan because he's just crap. But I was, although on the outside you would think, oh my God, she's really fit, she's really healthy, I was 100% what I would call skinny fat. So didn't train, didn't really follow any kind of And that's out there now. That's what women are aspiring to be, is that person that doesn't go to the gym and just doesn't eat. And
But like, it's very important that people recognize, don't confuse fitness with health.
yeah,
So like a healthy body fat for a female isn't abs. And there's nothing wrong with females having abs.
No.
There's absolutely nothing wrong
you
with
don't
that.
really need them though.
But in terms of
Yeah.
pregnancy, fitness and really excessive amounts of training is really detrimental to fertility as well.
In a healthy
females.
way. So you mean like you should do it?
You should do it,
Yeah.
but I mean excessive amounts
Excessive.
will lead to issues around fertility, because low body weight plays a big
Yeah,
role in
huge.
fertility as well. Like you'll often see, obviously, I wouldn't say bash is the right word, but like, there's always reference to being overweight and obese, but being underweight plays a big role as well.
It is, and when you look at the nice guidelines in terms of pregnancy, I actually call them the nasty guidelines, but there we are. There's a healthy BMI for underweight women, and I was shocked. It's not that low. So like the two thresholds, if you like. We'll talk about BMI now, actually, if that's okay. Does a man's BMI affect fertility? Okay, in what way?
Not directly in the same sense of, like, well, not that I've seen anyway,
Yeah.
in regards to, like, they have to be this BMI in order to have healthy sperm, but just because of what happens with males. So, like, when males have high body fat, they'll naturally convert their testosterone to estrogen. So they'll have problems there, so they'll have lower testosterone levels. And what comes with that, not just with the testosterone, but with general being overweight or obese in males, you'll have high inflammation, high oxidative stress. So that will generally affect
The sperm quality.
Anyway.
So,
Assuming that most men who become overweight don't do so by eating a lot of healthy food.
Yeah.
They do it by eating bad food generally.
again, can be corrected quite easily. Like, well, physically quite easily, but mentally you've got to put the effort in as well.
Oh, the idea is really easy.
Yeah.
The idea is really easy, but like actual application is hard.
It is.
But it's generally speaking, for most people, it's the ability to be able to lose 10% of their body weight.
Women as well?
Yeah.
So talk about a woman's BMI, a healthy BMI for fertility.
It's below, you said it was below 30, didn't you?
It's a fucker.
That's way too high.
I
though.
think it's like 27, 20. If you were going down, so say you're going down the IVF route, I don't quote me on this, guys, so please, drop me a message if I'm wrong. I'm sure they want it below 28%, 27%. But I think that's still quite high.
It's probably, you're playing with better percentages, but like if you look at, what is it? So when women go from normal weight to overweight, the chances of miscarriage is like, say, 30 to 40%. They go to like really overweight, it becomes 80 to 100% increase. And then when they become obese, it's 120 to 130% chance of miscarriage, comparably. So like for every single BMI, you start to move away from normal weight, the chances of miscarriage just continue to increase and increase.
And fertility issues.
Yeah. When I say miscarriage, that's just what I assume. Like,
Yes.
is fertility in of itself, right?
All in conjunction with one.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you, so I'll make an avatar, lady, BMI, I don't know, 40. So generally not very fit, shit diet, but continuously no issues, getting pregnant, carrying children. Are they just lucky?
There is genetic components to pregnancy, or the ability to be able to conceive, but like I don't talk about it as much because it's really subjective.
Well, it's sensitive as well, but
No, not the obesity part of
Yeah.
it, but I mean, like, because stress plays such a massive role in the ability to be able to become pregnant as well.
Yes.
Like, it could just be the fact that all these genetic factors work out for them, and also they could live in a really supportive relationship with a man they love and feel really safe.
Yeah.
Like, so just
That's
their chances
very
are
woo
way
of
better.
you.
Well, no stress, but that's what would make a pregnant woman stressed.
Yeah.
Like, so it's being a single mother, it's not having a supportive
Yeah.
relationship, it's living in poverty, it's all those things.
It all comes, Do you know what? I've never thought of it like that. You could have like a really fit person, BMI of like 20, has done everything she can, but be in a really abusive relationship, super fertile. Yeah, I've never thought of it like that.
Well, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, so even when they look at, was it endometriosis or PCOS, obviously strongly associated with infertility, but have a really strong association with sexual abuse as children. So are we looking at this as, does the body do this by mistake?
Well, Gabor Mate, When Your Body Says No. It's one of my favourite books.
But are these just protective mechanisms? So like if the body perceives threat, like even in males, right? If we're chronically stressed, our testosterone drops, and our sperm quality drops. So is that just protection? The body. So if you perceive threat in the world, is it the time to bring a baby into it? Probably not.
Oh my God, I've just had a light bulb moment. So when we wanted more kids, I think Larry was like 4 or 5. My kids don't even know this, so they're probably like, giving them the ick. And we went to a friend of mine who was a fertility doctor, because it was like there was no absolute reason why I could get pregnant but couldn't carry and all of this. And he said to me, why the fuck would you want another kid? I said, we're not going to pay for IVF, I just want to know that everything's okay. And it was unexplained infertility, but Jesus Christ, it was the most stressful time of our life. Like, I just qualified as a midwife. We nearly lost our house. Financially, we weren't in the best place in the world. And yeah, wow, I have my reason.
Well,
He said, he was like, why do you want to put another kid into your life? You're like, you've got enough, it's full. Yeah.
No, stress. I can't. Like again, I know I like to throw out stats, but like with stress, right. I can't remember the percentages and the likelihood of pregnancy. But it does make sense evolutionarily that if you're super stressed, why you would conceive. And stress can be physical. It doesn't, like, I don't mean physical as in like getting a beating, but like physical as in training.
Yeah.
Is a physical stress, and then like obviously psychological, emotional stresses play such a big role because it dysregulates hormonal output from the brain. So like let's think about males in this. When we get really stressed, our cortisol goes up.
Through the roof.
Cortisol works opposingly to testosterone generally, and similar, like you'll find like stress-induced amenorrhea in girls. So like they get super stressed, and it's not even through dieting, but just whatever that thing is, they stop having their periods.
Oh, it's the first thing that goes, and then they become irregular. Yeah. Can we talk about the vaginal microbiome? Because that's not talked about much at all, and it plays a huge impact in births, but also infertility, lifestyle, blah blah blah.
Yeah, so like some of the major reasons why women will, let's just say, not conceive, have a miscarriage, or not carry to full term is an immune reaction. So it's the reason why they give doxycycline to women when they're going through fertility treatment, because if there's chlamydia there, which chlamydia is really hard to diagnose correctly. If there's chlamydia there, if there's some sort of infection there, we have to clear that first, no matter what. So just give doxycycline.
So they just give it as like a first as last?
Preemptive.
Like a prophylactic, just in case?
Yeah.
Okay.
But vaginal health can obviously lead to all sorts of, the word infection isn't quite right because it's normally just a change in ecosystem. So the vaginal for anyone who's listening, the microbiome is, we all have different microbiomes. So like the one that most people hear about is the gut microbiome, because it has the most abundance of good and bad bacteria that play all these interlinking roles in our health. And then we have like our mouth microbiome, our ear, our anus, like we have any orifices in our body has some sort of microbiome. So the female vaginal microbiome, though, is really distinct from all of the other ones. Because if you look into the stomach, for example, it's like 3,000 plus, and they'll keep finding new ones of different bacteria. The female vaginal microbiome is strongly colonized by one type, lactobacillus. Lactobacillus crispatus is the major one. There's a couple of other ones as well. But the reason why it is that way is because the vaginal lining, or the epithelial wall, produces glycogen, which is like a carbohydrate, to feed this bacteria. And that bacteria will then produce like what's called D-lactate. It'll also produce hydrogen peroxide. So it makes sure that the vaginal ecosystem is really acidic so that it doesn't allow any other bacteria to come in and colonize.
Yeah.
Because it is technically exposed to the outside world.
Yeah.
Right? So what can happen over time in these circumstances is you start to get a change in the blend. So it happens...
Puberty?
Puberty is where it actually the microbiome gets solidified.
Okay.
But you think postmenopausally is when there's a dramatic change in it, because estrogen really dictates how you present vaginally. Yeah. So, but what can happen is like it's really interesting. Like women are 10% of females have undiagnosed bacterial vaginosis. It's really common, and when we have these infections, they're not technically infections, but when we get these dysbiotic states, women, it's first of all, it's not very hospitable to sperm, and secondly, the pH changes, and secondly, it really creates an immune response. So like when they give doxycycline, they're trying to suppress any sort of immune reaction, but they often neglected the vaginal microbiome in that circumstance. Like it should be a prerequisite if you're going to look at pregnancy. So when you get this shift over to like Gardnerella and E. coli and Prevotella, these other bacteria, and that's where women tend to get they do the smell test.
Yeah.
So it tends to get like white clear discharge, and it becomes quite fishy in terms of its odor. But those women the implantation tends to be very poor, the ability to conceive, but actually going to full term is a real problem. With bacterial vaginosis, and same with UTIs. So when they look at why it tends to happen, like they thought it was a genetic thing initially because it was black women and Latin American women who tended to get it. So they thought it was genetic.
Yeah.
Actually turns out just because they douche.
Wow.
So like you should not
douche, I know.
You should not douche. You should not use anything in regards to femme fresh. You should not use glitter bombs or anything that you can put in. They are used apparently. I'm not part of that generation anymore, man. I grew up when vaginas were just vaginas, right?
And you never spoke about it.
No, you never spoke
about it. Just looked at them when you had to.
Yeah, carried on. But this shift in bacteria can be a real issue for females and can really affect fertility in them. And it is, like I said, often neglected. And the problem with something like bacterial vaginosis and UTIs is the reoccurrence rate is so high with antibiotic use. So the use of antibiotics, particularly with back vag, can I call it that?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
it's what I call
gross.
It is. Back vag.
The reoccurrence rate is like 50%. So it just keeps coming back
Same
and
as
keeps coming
UTIs.
back because you haven't changed the ecosystem.
But then you get fucking antibiotics to cure it, which then affects your microbiome.
Yeah.
Is it the same with pelvic inflammatory disease, PID?
Don't know.
No, I had PID, so I'm just asking. I'll find out. Because I had that when I was younger, and I'm like, oh, maybe that was a reason why. Going back to that then, can it be changed with food? Nutrition?
So you don't actually you can target it. It would take an awful lot longer, but supplementally tends to be a much better way. And the research is relatively limited, but like there's really good research out there on like the use of like vaginal probiotics. So the use of Lactobacillus reuteri works really well. Plantarum works really well. But they won't recolonize, but they'll help to outcompete some of the bad bacteria. But the use of stuff like lactulose that we give to old people to poop, it works really well.
What? So you mean drinking it,
no,
or actually putting it up the vagina?
Yeah, putting it up the vagina. So like with a syringe, works really well.
No
and actually,
shit.
the use of diluted hydrogen peroxide works really well.
Fuck.
And so does there's another supplement called lactoferrin that works really,
like
really
that's
well.
in breast milk, isn't it?
Yeah, works really
So,
well.
putting breast milk up there can help.
Probably. But I would normally want to use like high dose lactoferrin, like in a supplement, like in a suppository, and you can put that directly up there. Even if you get into stuff like the strep issues that tend to occur, but
GBS.
Do you know like that the use of like garlic cubes works brilliantly.
As in putting it
Yeah,
into
because
your vagina.
Allicin is a derivative within garlic that's really potent at killing strep. So I can't remember what.
I know, like, because obviously I'm Group B strep.
Yeah.
I look after women who've had it, and you can have it one day and not the next. I know, like, topically, like garlic cream or whatever, things with garlic in and eating it. I never ever thought of, and why wouldn't we?
Yeah, putting it up.
Putting it where the problem is.
Apparently,
like,
it doesn't hurt. So like so when they did the research on it, and it worked really effectively, it didn't seem to have any negative effects in terms of pain or irritation or anything like that, but is really, really effective. So is lactoferrin in that circumstance as well.
I think the reason why stuff like that's not, I mean, it is out there, obviously, you found it, is because, and we've had this conversation, is because everyone is scared of pregnant people.
Oh yeah, super scared.
Nobody,
scared.
Like, whenever I've asked you for advice, it's always with, like, capital letters. This is not medical advice, but try this. But it could have such a massive impact on women's pregnancies, because ladies who get diagnosed with GBS, they're landed in this two worlds of IV antibiotics when you're in labour or post-birth,
Really
because your baby,
well.
exactly,
Really
that affects
bad
your
for you.
fucking microbiome, affects your baby. Anyway, that's
So like an interesting, if anyone's interested, like there's a researcher out of Australia called Jason Horlick who does a lot on it, and he treats a lot of people who are going through pregnancy with garlic cloves. And he says
he's Australian.
He's Australian.
I'll add
No,
that.
I think he's British,
Is
but he
he?
lives in Australia.
In Australia, I'll add that link. I'll put it when we post this episode
Yeah,
at the bottom.
but super interesting in terms of how these are reasonably easily treated. Also, like, you got to look at, like, men play a role, particularly around back vag. Men play a big role here, so it's the amount of sexual partners that you have plays a big role here. So
What,
like,
in whether the woman?
we'll get it, yeah, because
Well,
whether that's
that makes sense.
whether it's the mixing of the bacteria, whether it's the sperm actually has any
Yeah.
issues there. So like the use of condoms plays a big role there. So it's really important to use condoms if you have multiple partners.
In a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
Yeah.
If you've got multiple partners and you suffer with stuff like back vag all the time.
I mean, I'm saying I think it goes quite undiagnosed because of everything that comes out of a vagina and your monthly cycles. I know you hate it. I can't believe you're on here talking about fannies, Greg. Like, it makes you cringe, and that you're so interested. Anyway, you know, your monthly cycles, the fact that, you know, it's hot and sweaty and you might not be wearing the right cotton pants. You don't actually realise that smell is actually back vag.
But even
reoccurring thrush, reoccurring UTIs.
But thrush is often misdiagnosed.
Yep.
Thrush or back vag is often misdiagnosed as thrush.
As thrush, yeah.
Like, I think that's a real big issue. But also, like, even women with endometriosis, there's a strong link between endometriosis and E. coli in the large intestine. So everyone used to think it was just retrograde menstruation, but there seems to be an awful lot more than that. So women tend to have much more E. coli in their menstrual blood when they have their periods if they have endometriosis. So obviously that can lead to back vag as well. So it becomes multi-layered sometimes, but most of the time, like, back vag can be really easily treated without the use of antibiotics.
Without the use of antibiotics.
Genuinely. And 3 days for the vaginal epithelial wall to be replaced.
Yeah.
So the treatment cycle is really short. It's 3 days or 3 weeks. I can't remember. I think it's 3 days.
But still, like, I thought it was years. So.
But so the treatment rate can be really quick. So like you can normally.
So you can be diagnosed. You could do a swab and be diagnosed with vag back or whatever, and it's not a forever thing. The treatment for it is actually a fast turnaround, and it doesn't have to be antibiotics.
No, it should. I'm not anti-antibiotic.
No, I know you're not.
But I think with back vag, it's a really terrible approach.
Well, it's a microbiome problem, and as I've repeatedly said, the antibiotics strip the microbiome.
But also, like, back vag, because there's a big E. coli component to it, that can lead to UTIs quite regularly as well, because the most dominant bacteria in UTIs is E. coli. I think it's like 70% of the time it's E. coli that is causing that problem. And E. coli has to make the descent from the gut down to create UTIs. So you probably have elevated E. coli in your gut as well. I
remember, because Nathan's had testing and stuff, and we were talking about E. coli, and I shit myself, didn't I? I was like, he's going to die.
No, yeah.
Because it's a scary word, but it isn't really that hard to treat, is it? Or
No,
is it...
like we all have some E. coli
Yeah,
that are good, and there's different types of E. coli. There's even positive E. coli that can produce vitamin K, apparently. So,
Really?
Yeah. So not like, I mean, you can treat. There's a Nisla 1914 is a type of probiotic that's actually E. coli that you can treat E. coli with. Right, because it
Wow.
outcompetes it. So it's a positive form of E.
Yeah.
coli that can outcompete the bad form of E. coli. So there is like positives to E. coli. It's mostly bad though.
Yeah.
But like we all have some. It's just when it becomes overgrown that it becomes an
Overgrown.
issue. So like E. coli infection is enterohemagic. I always get that word wrong. E. coli generally, which is really virulent, that can cause all the issues around it.
It's not a personal question, but whatever. Did you know any of this when you started your family?
No. Yeah, I did. I knew a bit. I probably didn't take it as seriously as I should have, but yeah, I did know.
What could have you done differently if you did know though?
I would have taken 6 months before I started trying.
Really?
Yeah.
That's such a big thing because
Yeah.
couples are they are going down that road now of getting their having an MOT and getting their bodies ready, and I didn't. I just thought I want a baby. Well, Evan wasn't planned, but there we go. That's another podcast. That's a generational thing. I think the new are they called Gen Zs or
I think
whatever?
they're Gen Zs now. And
They are playing like a much bigger role in making sure that they are more physically fit so they have healthier kids.
Yeah, and I think like without going down that route either, like looking at like obviously the amount of childhood disability that tends to increase.
Yeah.
There's a genetic component to that, definitely, but there's also a big factor, a big environmental factor that's playing a role in that. So looking at your health before you go in to have a kid is going to play a big role.
Yeah, do you know what? I think I would have done the same. I think I would, knowing what I know now. Well, I am got 3 girls in my life, 2 daughters and 1 that should be. And I'm investing in them understanding their cycles and their bodies more. Yeah. I feel quite sad sometimes that I can't go back and redo it all again. And my kids are healthy, but how do I know? I don't know what's going to hit them when they're older. And, as parents, we do play a part in that.
Major role.
But I never ever thought about it.
Yeah,
So
we didn't know. Well,
No.
I should have known because mine's only 4 years ago, and I
yeah,
did
but
know.
even then, though.
I would have had a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe not to the depth I know now, but I still had a pretty good idea that the health of me and his mother would have played a major role.
And yeah.
To be honest, I was just hoping she wouldn't get pregnant.
Time for another, Greg. Would you say, as a culture, we are becoming increasingly dysfunctional in terms of health-wise? Are we producing an unwell population?
I mean, look around.
I know.
Look around. I think it's getting consistently worse. Whether we look at the increase in type 2 diabetes, in fact, cardiovascular disease, although we've poured billions into it, still our biggest killer. Alzheimer's dramatically increasing. And that's not just associated with increase in old people. The percentages don't add up. Increased childhood developmental issues. Name anything else. Increased autoimmunity in the population. So we are just getting sicker and sicker.
And
dramatically sicker and sicker.
I'll talk about him every day on every single podcast.
Gabor Mate,
I just love him. He was talking to the Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
He was on their podcast and he was talking about epigenetic issues and genetic issues, and they're 2 different things. So epigenetic is not something that it's not in your genes, which I didn't know. So you're better at explaining things than me. So you explain the difference between the 2 and how one can be.
So epi just means on top of. So it's the expression of your genes. So people always talk about genetics, I'm genetically, only because I used to hear it a lot.
I still say it.
Genetically, I'm overweight, and it's don't get me wrong, there is genetic predisposition to that, but genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So
That's such an easy way.
Yeah. It's an easy way to think about it. Now, there is some genes out there that really predispose us to stuff, like ApoE4, for example, really predisposes us to Alzheimer's, but there's still dramatic amounts of lifestyle stuff that you can do to influence those things. Epigenetics, although we're crap at testing, we're really good at testing genetics.
Yeah.
But epigenetics, we're not very good at testing yet. I guess it just means that like genetically you're not destined. It's like, think about predestination. Was that Calvinism? Was the religion that predisposed you to go to heaven?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like that. Majority, like genetics wise, it's going to determine what you can end up like in certain circumstances.
If you don't make changes.
Well, a really interesting one, like MAOA predicts our ability to be able to break down dopamine, right?
Okay.
Put that person, they sometimes refer to as the warrior gene, or was that COMT? I can't remember. So like put that person in a safe environment, they will tend to become, they'll climb the social ladder really quickly and tend to become really successful because they don't break down dopamine really well. So dopamine stays around for longer. And then you can get someone who grew up in a war zone, and that actually makes them more traumatized because they can't come down.
Yeah, that's me. And the first one's probably you.
I'm a mixture now, all right.
Yeah. That's bonkers. So that's a genetic thing.
Yeah. So like environment plays such a big role in how your genes express themselves. So like I used to, like you must hear it all the time. Genetically, my dad had high blood pressure and his dad had high blood pressure.
In pregnancy. We ask those questions though, and I'm getting to a point, because I'm reading a lot more, that when I ask these questions, I'm like, and then it does put women on a pathway of interventions if they tick a box that their dad had diabetes, what type 1, type 2, and even for the man and whatever. But actually, they're going to be fine because they've got a healthy lifestyle. It doesn't mean that you need to be put on this pathway of a high-risk pregnancy because of your family history if you don't have the symptoms. It's one of the most frustrating things for me as a midwife.
You hear it all. Like I hear it all the time. Like, oh, my dad had high blood pressure and so did his dad. It's like, yeah, but they were all alcoholics.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, like we don't know if this is a genetic problem or just you all lived shit lives.
Environmental.
Yeah.
So you're kind of predisposed to it, but you haven't helped yourself either.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always that big talk about whether alcoholism is genetic. Like, I'm a 50-50 on it.
Well, our ability to be able to process alcohol is genetic.
No way.
Yeah, Asians, for example, that's why Asians get such bad hangovers. Is ALD2, alcohol dehydrogenase 2, is responsible for taking down acetaldehyde, which makes us feel hungover. So they tend to have a snip in that gene. So that's why, like, you don't see it as much. Like Asians drink, they get so hungover. Yeah, it's just not worth it.
I mean, not that that's anything to do with what we're talking
about.
No,
but
fucking
just
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could, you know what an avatar is, like the perfect person or whatever. Maybe not if you could have a male avatar and a female avatar, they're starting their family, and they want to invest in it, and they want in physically, financially, emotionally. What is the best pathway? Like for them, like I can talk about it emotionally, obviously, but they want a healthy pregnancy. They want to work on their fertility, and then not only that, create a healthy child. What's the pathway if they've got 6 to 12 months?
So to start with ideal weight, right?
Yeah.
I just think that's it's the low hanging fruit. And obviously it depends if they've already had issues with miscarriage or infertility. But then you would obviously want to check in regards to, like, there's a certain amount of blood tests that you'd want to see just to be sure in those circumstances that there's nothing of concern. So, like, you'd obviously go through the thyroid issue. You'd probably touch on, like, prolactin. You'd touch on something like homocysteine, and then you'd go through, like, general health markers then to make sure they're all engaged. So you cover all the big bases for the female to ensure that there's no issues. And then predominantly you want a really healthy relationship between man and woman.
Yeah, emotionally.
Yeah.
That you both want it. Because I did a call with a girl the other day about doing the preconception MOT, and her partner just does not want to do it. And we've spoke about this, and it was really difficult because I was like, he needs to be on board.
Because it's a big red flag.
Absolutely. Why would you want to go down the route of starting a family with someone who's not as invested in? But I think that's generational as well. I think because it's never been highlighted that if the man's got a good sperm count, he's done his job, so now it's over to the woman. Yeah,
I think as well, though, like with that, it's the same in anything, because if, say, so Nathan had some Nathan had like high blood pressure, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I want you to work with Greg. And he's like, no, I don't want to. And you drag him there.
Yeah.
And I can see that. It's like, he's not going to stick to anything I tell him to do.
No.
Because he's not here because he wants to be. And I like, so just using that as an example, like I'd be like, yeah, this probably isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Like, let's leave that alone. But and unfortunately, with pregnancy, it takes two to tango.
Completely.
So when you have a female who's so invested in it and having like everything go the way they want it to go, and then you have a male who's just so disinterested, it's a real red flag.
Oh, it's hard.
Yeah, it's a real
It's
red
heartbreaking. Like that call was really difficult, but I knew instantly, you know, when I was on the call to her that, and I said like you can't. I mean, you can pay and you can do all the testing that you want in the world, but if you're fine, there's obviously an issue with your partner. So why would you want to start this route?
I think it's great to know now, though, for women that it's 30.
Well, she could just fuck him off.
Well, she could just
and
fuck him
find
off,
someone
find
else.
someone else,
At least she knows she's fine.
But like I think it's great to know for females now, though, that like it's the males play just as big a role in fertility as females do. I think that's really big.
Well, when I posted it on my Instagram, it went wild, but it was big for me. Not just because of like my history, I'm not bringing it back to me, even though I always do, but just as a midwife, to be able to support women and be like, well, actually, you're having these reoccurring miscarriages, you're taking all the supplements, you're doing all of this, you're on the miscarriage protocol with the NHS. Yes, he's had his sperm tested and he's all good to go, but actually there may just be something underlying with him that he can rectify way sooner than you.
Yeah, yeah.
Before I ask you my last 3 cheesy questions that you're dreading answering, is there anything else that you want to add or anything else you want to talk about?
Genetically, women need to look at methylation, definitely. So there's a marker which never gets tested, and it's actually quite hard to get in the UK. Easy to get in the States.
Oh, is that the one we were talking about the other day?
Yeah. So like assessing for homocysteine is going to be a really important marker for all females to get if they're having issues with fertility. You might hear methylation out there in the the Twitter sphere where Gary Brecka.
Oh, I can't stand him. He's such a twat.
But he made it famous, in fairness. But high homocysteine is like a really big predictor for thrombus in females, especially when they're pregnant, and it can also lead to poor blood flow to the placenta. So that can be a major reason as well. Underlying issue why females aren't like holding to full term.
So would that be the first port of call? Or is that something you would do if you've exhausted all other avenues? I'd
get anyone to do homocysteine. It's just not as easy to get over here.
Yeah.
I deal with a lot of clients in the States. Like I can get on every corner over there.
Yeah, of course.
It's just a little bit more difficult to get here.
Well, we've just got one place here.
Yeah, one place.
In Cardiff.
There's like functional diagnostics does it, but they need to be centrifuged.
Yeah.
So it becomes a pain in the ass, and there's nowhere in South Wales that does that.
No, I know. That's wild.
So it is a real pain in the ass. But yeah, I definitely want that to be checked for women if they're struggling.
I don't think they would do it on the NHS.
I've never, ever had someone... I've had loads of people go in and ask, not females, males, because it predisposes everyone to cardiovascular disease, but always getting males to go in and check, especially if they have high blood pressure. And never has it been done. I've never seen it done on an NHS panel.
So if anyone wants that test, just get in touch with me and we can sort it out for you. Mm-hmm. Right, my 3 cheesy questions. Well, you know them anyway, don't you? So what's one defining moment in your life?
Leaving Dublin and coming to Cardiff.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? You did it for your missus, didn't you?
Yeah, so I met my missus in Dublin, but she's from Cardiff.
But she actually looks really Irish with her hair.
With her ginger hair.
Beautiful, yeah.
Because I got into bad habits in Ireland. So
we've all been there, Greg.
So it allowed me a really clean restart on my life, which was great. It took me away from bad influences, dangerous job, the nightlife. It took me away from all of that, and I moved into a country where I didn't know anybody, and that was nice.
Does she know that?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, she will now.
Oh, I wouldn't give her the satisfaction to tell her.
I've got goose pimples. I've never heard you explain it like that.
Yeah.
I genuinely just thought you come over here too.
Oh, that's why I did come.
Yeah.
That's why I came originally.
Yeah.
But like, it was really hard when I moved here first. But when I think back on it, it was a really defining moment.
Yeah. Wow. Number 2, If you could go back and tell your younger self something, what would it be?
Don't go to university.
Oh, yes. Fucking brilliant. Even though I had to.
I'm not anti-university by any stretch, but I think going to university, I spent 4 years doing an arts degree. So like history and classics. And
you're so not that person.
And it was just like, I was lucky. I went in Ireland when it was free.
Yeah.
So like I didn't come out with
So you're not
debt.
saying because of the debt, the financial
No,
side
I just think
of it.
unless you're going into a vocation.
Yeah,
like,
that's why I had to go to uni.
I think it is a big waste of time now. And the reason why I say that, I don't mean for everybody, so before anyone jumps on, I don't mean for everybody, but I think now the beauty of it is like most stuff you can do privately, so pay to play. And if you're good at your job, you need an Instagram page and you need to be good at your job.
That is so true. Like, I struggle with social media and things like that. I'm so thick as shit. Like even this podcast, I was going to start it in my living room, and then I thought, Kat, what are you doing? You can't even turn your fucking phone on. But sadly, it's the way of the world. But it doesn't really take that much time and effort. Like just getting a good Instagram account. You don't need a 3-year degree.
No, you need to. I mean, you need to be good at your job.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, that's great. Like, so, like, you know, like if you're in, I always use fashion as an example.
Yeah.
You don't have to suck a dick anymore to get into fashion. Like, you can just be really good at your job, and have an Instagram page. Like, acting is probably still that way, but still.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. You need to listen to Davina McCall with The Diary of a CEO. She talks about all... I never liked her, and I listened to that podcast.
She was a massive cokehead, wasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, I heard it's all a bit of a...
But she talks about all of that.
Yeah.
That was really fascinating. What's one book, one quote, or one podcast that you would advise people to... like as a must-have that they should listen to or read?
In regards to this?
I suppose, yeah. Well, give me two. One just for life, and then to this.
So I would say podcast-wise, or someone to listen to, Laura Brydon's great.
Laura Brydon.
Yeah, that's in terms of female health overall.
Yeah.
Right. So she has. I have read her books. She's called like the Metabolic Fix for Females. There's another one that's in regards to cycles for females, and she's really, really knowledgeable because I can spot the crap a mile away.
Yeah.
She's brilliant. So like follow her on Instagram. She'd be a great person to follow. Book I loved, and it's just I don't read novels or self-help.
No, you read research.
Yeah, most of the time. But one book that really hit home with me was The Go-Giver, and someone gave that to me in regards to sales, and I remember thinking, I don't want to read a sales book, man.
Yeah.
But The Go-Giver was great because it's basically like just do loads of stuff for other people, and things tend to work out. I know it's really.
Oh my God!
I know
How
it's
simple.
Yeah, but it's like don't try and sell to people. Like just be human to people, and generally like the sales will come within reason, and I think that's reasonably true. But I thought that was brilliant because that took the stress off me. Instead of trying to be a salesman,
we hate it.
Just be yourself and try and solve the problem.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah, it was brilliant.
What's do you know who the author is?
No, it's just called The Go-Giver. It's quite a famous book, I think.
Yeah, because I hate the sales part of my job, but it's when you work for yourself,
there's an element of it, yeah. But.
I love that. Well, thank you. This has been fascinating. I will most definitely have you back on. Yeah, we're done.